We spend far too much time worried about what makes us different than the next person or better than the next person, and not enough time thinking about why we should respect the next person. We all have a story, an overarching theme that runs through our lives and makes us who we are. The problem is, we think that since each of our stories is different, there's not a lot of perceived value and shared struggle. But we have far more in common than we can imagine, and what motivates one person can certainly help us as well. The Third Lap podcast is about understanding, respecting, and appreciating the struggle that it takes to overcome immeasurable odds in order to reach your destiny. Join me as I interview and bond with some of the most inspiring and incredible people, diving into their why to get a full understanding of their being. Without each other, we have nothing. So let's go on this adventure together and take on the future with open minds and open hearts. Welcome to the Third Lap podcast. What's going on, everybody? Thank you for joining us for another episode of the Third Lap podcast. Extremely excited, as always, to connect with my guest today. So I have the fortune of connecting with Scott Steward, who is he's a professional lion chaser, metaphorically speaking, and we'll get into what that exactly means. Father, educator, and also the founder of Genius Lab Incorporated, which we'll also get a chance to talk about more in depth. But Scott, man, thank you so much for joining me today. How you feeling, man?
Man, I am blessed, and I am honored to be here with you today. I know that you are a man of power and influence, and the Spirit directed me to that. And so it's an honor to be here with you, Maul. Thank you for having me, man.
Yeah, I appreciate you, man. The feeling is definitely mutual. And so Scott and I, we actually connected through LinkedIn. Scott, I was curious about Genius Lab, so we ended up having a conversation. And so I was working to potentially get his programming integrated where I work currently. As I told him, TBD on that. We're still working on it. But the important part was that we created a connection outside of that. And I felt that Scott was a great person to have on the podcast to be able to just talk about his progression as a person and as a professional. And ultimately, really, again, just give us a chance to learn more about Genius Lab and his time teaching as an educator. So was excited to have you on, man. But anything you want to add about how we got to know each other?
Nah, man, it's funny, the pandemic really put that focus on us connecting virtually, right? So, of course, I had a LinkedIn profile for, 10 years, and been underutilizing it until the pandemic. And it was like, hey, first of all, it's hard, challenging. I want to be mindful of the words, but sometimes it seems that finding upstanding, upwardly mobile, educated, professional black men is just sometimes rare. And not that we not out here. We are out here, but I was glad to come across your profile. And man, I did not imagine we would be here. I hoped, but I didn't imagine it. But I'm glad that we're here today. So thanks for that, man. Thanks for rocking with me.
Absolutely, man. And again, thank you for coming on the podcast. I know you're a busy guy, got the 18 months old in the background. So, we tapped in for a second. I found some time on Scott's calendar. So again, brother, I appreciate you. And so this is the Rep Your Hood section, man. So let us know where you coming from.
I'm from the south side of Chicago, proud south side of Chicago, Wild Hundreds. To everybody who knows Chicago, I know you know the Wild Hundreds. And born and raised here. The only time I left was when my college days. But I am born and raised and currently reside on the south side of Chi. That's what's up.
Yeah, that's what's up, man. It's funny enough, I'm watching Southside that's from Comedy Central, that awesome comedy.
Right.
Man, I've been watching that. I've seen it numerous times. I was just watching it before we got on. So it's funny that I'm watching the Southside. We connect about the Southside.
Yeah.
But definitely shouts out to Chicago, man. A great city. I only been once for a little bit of time. I want to go back when I touch down. You and I'll definitely connect. But yeah, man, I've heard nothing but great things outside of the news, right? Like the news talks about the negative components of Chicago, but I'm fortunate to know people from the city that give me an update on all the positive things happening too. And it's a lot of good stuff going on in Chicago for sure. So shout outs to the Chi again. And so, yeah, Scott, this is really my opportunity to turn the podcast over to you. And
Wow.
so I would love to hear, really, where do you think your career story begins? Where's your origin story start?
Man, yeah, it starts when I was 12. The moment my mom, shout out to my mom, Rosemary Steward. Shout out to my mom, man, who introduced me to entrepreneurship at an early age. I was 12. She incorporated me in my first business at 12 years old, and I fought her every single step of the way. I never, I wanted the money, I wanted the power, I didn't want to do the work. And I remember I was responsible for, cutting the grass and, washing cars and raking leaves on my block, and there's enough houses, I could do 5-6 houses and make, 40-50 bucks. And that was my job. But like I said, I kind of was fighting it. She was, kind of really forcing me in so many ways, in a very good way, to kind of do it. And I remember one time, man, I was watched one of my neighbor's car. My friends were riding they bikes. This is back in the day when Schwinn Stingrays was on and popping. I had a metallic green one with the banana seats, man, and they riding their bikes, and I got to wash my neighbor's car. And I remember just really trying to hurry up and be done, that, I didn't wash. The car was parked in the driveway. So I only really washed the side that if he came out to look at the car, then that's the part that he would see. And I really thought that I was going to get away with it. And it was cool. He came out, he stood on his porch. He was like, man, great job. Like, cool. Gave me my $10. I'm on my bike. And I remember however long later, I'm just hearing my name called again. I hear my name called, and I got to go wash this car again. I got to go wash it again. And I remember in that moment, man, like being mad at myself. I was like, I don't want to do work like this. I want to do work well enough so when I do it the first time, I don't have to go back and do it again. And I was young when I learned that lesson. But I didn't think much of it. But my cousin and I threw some dope parties back in high school. We became kind of, I threw one of the best parties in my neighborhood that people still talk about to this day. Did some things in college. I went to Southern University, Baton Rouge, Louisiana, initially to major in broadcast journalism. I've always been a great orator, articulator. I thought I could do something in front of the camera. Realized I didn't want to do anything in front of the camera. A little too self-conscious. Didn't want to be on screen. But I took a liking to behind the camera. So I started doing video editing. So I was making music videos for all the rappers on campus. Wasn't that many, quite honestly. Like I'm saying, like all the rappers, like it was a line of them. Listen, at that time, it really wasn't that many. Everybody wasn't trying to do it. It was still very, very much a profession for the big names. At that time, Redman was like really, really popular. So made a few dollars doing that. And then after spending 4 years in Baton Rouge at Southern, I ran out of money. And I had the grades, but my mom no longer was going to pay for it. I had here's a sidebar conversation. One of the reasons I kept my GPA up is because I knew when to drop a class. I knew when to drop a class. So right at that point in the semester where it's like either you got to keep it or let it go, you got to make that decision or it's going to affect your GPA. So I was letting classes go, and that's how I was able to maintain my GPA. But my mom saw, like you kind of BSing. You know what I mean? Like you playing the game, you BSing, right? You sign up for 18 hours and you end up with 12. Come on, bruh. What's happening? So I left Southern Baton Rouge and came home to Chicago. Had to rethink my life. I wound up actually getting my undergrad from Columbia College here in Chicago, which my undergrad is in marketing communications. And this is when I had shifted back to that business mind. My friends will tell you that I've always been the guy that was always talking about the business. Like, how, like, look, guys, we want to throw this party, but look, we need this. Like, they were not thinking that. I was always the only guy kind of thinking that. So, you know, get my undergrad, graduate, get a good job, working at a bank the same year of the Million Man March. So you should start being able to date me without me saying it. But so I'm out of undergrad and I go to the Million Man March, fresh out of undergrad, fresh into a new job, and wound up returning from the Million Man March late, and it cost me my job. And that's where the entrepreneurship, trek really began. So I did take some more corporate jobs. I've always had great corporate jobs and have made a name for myself in the corporate space. But it wasn't until grad school that our final project we had to create something that consumers would buy. And I created an entrepreneurship program for young black men because I was like, man, this corporate game is whack, right? It's a ceiling that you're probably not going to crack, And so you got to empower yourself. And that's when that's the introduction to entrepreneurship. Again, shout out to my mom for putting it on me. And so that's where I started pushing this entrepreneurship program. I went to a couple of high school principals. Literally, here's the story, Mom. I went to 19 high school principals. Every last one of them said no. At this point, I'm done, right? I don't even realize it's 19 at the time. I learned that it was 19 in retro because I had to go do some research on that. There were 19 principals. I'm telling my buddy this story. I'm like, man, screw this, man. I'm just gonna get another job. I know I can get work. And my buddy is like, well, hold up. My mom is a principal at a high school. This is a dope program. You should go holler at my mom. And I'm like, cool, whatever. She loves the program. She's like, I love the program and it should be in my school, but I can't afford it. But here's what I can do. Chicago Public Schools has an alternative teaching certificate. You would qualify for it. Why don't you come on and teach this marketing, business, entrepreneurship class, and I'll get you the alternative certification, teaching certification. So I don't have a background in education. I wrote this program. It was a great program, and I am now experiencing the evolution of my entrepreneurship program that I wrote in grad school, that I created in grad school. And that's what this is. And that's a broad stroke, bird's eye view of kind of how I got to this point today.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you. And so Chicago to Southern, wow, that's a heck of a transition, man.
Culture shock too.
Ooh, we absolutely.
Yeah.
I'm so sure. And it's funny because you did like the reverse migration of a lot of our ancestors who came from Louisiana and ended up in Chicago. And so you flipped it around. So, that's a cool trek and backwards that I'm sure was very influential. I love the part about dropping classes. I never mastered that. That I didn't pick that up. So you was messing the game, brother. I love it. Yeah. And then definitely shout outs to Redman, because Redman is definitely one of my favorite rappers. Shout outs to the Bricks. Even though he wasn't a part of Wu-Tang, he did so much work with the Wu. So it was funny. We like kindred spirits, man. Our broadcast journalism was a big passion of mine. I still do video editing and do all the editing for the podcast. And so, of course we ended up connecting. We was on the same wavelength, man.
You my brother, man. Because
you
my brother, man.
Absolutely.
That's what's up.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I would love, well, first, and also shout outs to your mom. You reminded me of a conversation I had with my homeboy who has his own business, and his sons are 6 and 3. What up, Ahern? And I was joking with him, but not joking with him. I'm like, when you gonna start introducing them to the business? Because it's never too early for them to learn entrepreneurship, right? And so, starting at 12, I have a theory that most successful entrepreneurs had a partner or a family member that exposed them to it early to kind of take the shock away from it once they got older to be able to pursue it. And so to see or hear that play out for you directly is awesome. So Scott, man, you mentioned being in corporate America, but eventually becoming a career changer. Talk to us about that, because this is a podcast that's had several educators on it. I'm an educator myself. Several educators listen to it. Anyone that knows anything about teaching, those first 2 to 3 years of teaching are extremely difficult. But you stuck that joint out for 16 years, brother. So, you had a heck of a career as an educator. I would just love to hear some of the lessons that you learned as a teacher, and what are some of the experiences that you have with your students that continue to motivate you to move forward.
Man, that is such a loaded question. Well, not even a prompt. That's just a loaded prompt. I did not know what I was doing as a teacher. I'm thrust by opportunity into this classroom, formal teacher's classroom. I immediately recognized, and now you're forcing me to go back and play back some of those. I got to bring up some of those experiences. But I remember being super intimidated because these are teachers. I'm not a teacher. Like, how am I going to stand next to teachers in their domain, right? I don't have their education. I didn't go to school for this. And although I had my share of run-ins with teachers in the high school level, trust me, in every inch of my spirit, brother, I never once imagined that I too would be a teacher. I never. And in a Chicago public high school where I once attended, I knew what kind of student I was. I was an average student on my best day. What saved me was that I attended one of the best high schools in the city at that time. So I was the guy who would just go with the norm, right? So if I was have been in the worst high school, I probably would be having a different conversation today. I would have gone with that norm. Whatever the masses were going to do at that time, I was going to fit right in. And that's what happened at Morgan Park. That's the school that I went to. It was a really good, top performing high school in the city. And I was an average kid. So being an average kid at Morgan Park, you're pretty good. You halfway decent. Like, you can't lose. I did enough not to fail. And I did enough not to get in too much trouble at home. But I never did more than what was asked or expected or required. I never went above and beyond. I remember where I grew up. I remember I just knew the kids. I knew the kids. The students, this first school that I taught at was one of the worst schools on the south side of Chicago. I'm a product of one of the best schools on the south side of Chicago. But I live in a neighborhood with one of the worst schools on the south side of Chicago. So understand what I just said. I taught at one of the worst schools on the south side of Chicago. I attended one of the best schools on the south side of Chicago. But I lived in a neighborhood that also housed one of the worst high schools in Chicago. Matter of fact, the high school in my neighborhood is the high school. If you go back and do your research, look up Darian Albert. Darian Albert was killed outside of his high school, beat up by some kids back in 2012-ish, 13-ish, somewhere up in there. That's the high school that I was supposed to go to. My father had influence. My father was one of the first black Chicago police officers. Rest in peace to my pops. He pulled some strings, got me in Morgan Park, which was, I should have tested into, but he pulled some strings and got me in Morgan Park. That's one of the best high schools. So I'm there, that dude who could have easily went either way, right? I tried to get into the gangs. I tried. And they were like, man, we know your pops. We know you. You're good. You don't need to join this gang. But anything you need from us, let us know. You can hang with us. We got you. Like, you want to be that, like, we got you. You not really one of us, but if you want, we got you, but you don't have to be part of us. We're not going to do that because we know who you are and we know your pops. I took that experience with me for the rest of my days, even to today. So when I'm talking to kids, I'm always coming from, look, I am you. I am lucky that I was afforded these opportunities, and you don't get these kind of chances very often. And that is the premise, the basis from which I do all of my teaching to this day. So I was a lot younger at the time, so it was easier for me to connect with those students, maybe a little bit more so than it is today. But back then, it was just the connection to I am you, and this resonated with the young ladies as well. I am you. You don't have to be a victim of your circumstances. You don't have to be a victim of your environment. You can change it if you want it. And that has been what has carried me all of these years. That's from which I teach and have this high level of engagement that put me into newspapers and magazines and awards and things of that nature.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
Yeah. Absolutely. And Scott, what's your father's name?
Morris L. Steward.
So let's have a quick moment of silence for Morris L. Steward. Yeah, my brother, man, powerful story. And it's funny because, of course, man, of course. I was going to ask you, how did you avoid that component? Because, unfortunately, Chicago is known for its gang violence, right? Like drill music has become an international sensation. And I quickly remind people, drill music is about gang members riding around each other's neighborhoods, killing each other, right? Like, let's keep it in perspective. But this isn't just something that started with Chief Keef and 300. Like, this has been around for generations. And so it was really interesting to hear from you how you were engaged with the gangs and like, yeah, you can hang with us, but you can't be with us because like we know that this isn't for you. And how important it is for those types of interactions. Like I had similar ones, right? Like I was living in Texas doing way too much, had a conversation with a dude, and he literally was like, yo, Mal, like you need to go home. Like the streets, like what you doing right now, it's gonna get you killed. Like you smart, you could go to college, you could do anything you want. Like, why are you here? And at 19, I really had to sit down with myself and be like, well, okay, why am I doing this? Why am I here? And eventually took my behind back to Jersey and sort of got my stuff together over the next few years. But, I've been in that situation. So when you said that, it really resonated with me that, sometimes those folks are out here saving our lives, right? Like they end up, even though they're knee deep in it, they see something in you that they know is valuable and can't get exhausted or consumed through this gang life and violence. And so I'm glad that they pointed you in a different direction because ultimately we wouldn't be having this conversation. And so Scott, you mentioned not being a teacher. I can relate to that too as a career changer that started teaching at 28 with no background in education. I was rapping and then I became a teacher. And so, I've definitely remember that feeling too. And even still to this day, because I only taught for a year, my background is not in education, that there are certain times where career educators look at me with side eye, like, why am I listening to this dude? What does this dude really know? And so absolutely experienced that. You were teaching tech though, at a time when technology was not the big thing, right? Like, trying to get folks involved in IT and really in computer technology and entrepreneurship. And so talk to us about technology. Why did that become the push for you? And then ultimately, as you transitioned into Genius Lab, where a lot of your work is around coding and IT, why tech? Why are you making such a big push around tech and for our Black and brown students to understand it and comprehend how they can use it for themselves?
All right, so I'm gonna answer that second. Why tech? What was the push for tech? Let me go back for a second. Listen, everybody in Chicago, in my generation, we give Al Capone all the praise. That's the 20s, right? So this is a gangster town. We do not forget that. We know there's nobody born and raised in Chicago who this is a gangster town, right? And it's pervasive, and we recognize you really can't avoid it. And so let me just put this in perspective. I tried to be in the streets, bro. I tried because I had an older cousin who was a gangster disciple, because I had the big homies on the block who was vice lords, right? And I wasn't missing nothing at the house. It was just like, that's what's out here. Now here's the important piece, and I'm going to transition into kind of this tech piece. But my father was one of the first Black Chicago police officers, right? But my father used to put me on when we would go out on Sundays. He would show me what people were doing on the streets. So it's freaking weird. I didn't realize it until much later in life, but he put me on to the streets. In his mind, he was putting me on to tell me what to watch out for. But it also was putting me on, and it made me aware of what to watch out for, right? And so I had those street smarts, man. I saw things. I saw things from a detective's perspective, a police officer's perspective, and I was bringing it back. So trust me, that's a whole nother podcast on some of the things that I've done in my years trying to be accepted by that element of the streets. But I was the guy who never read the instructions to hook up the VCR. I was the guy who never read the instructions to hook up the first cable box. For us, it was on TV, or it was something before on TV. But my dad also he could have been a mathematician. He could have been a scientist. So that was back in the day. He put me on to tinkering and soldering. So we built our first cable box. We soldered capacitors onto the motherboard, right? Yep. So I dismissed all of that experience, but it was kind of in me. So I was the guy that just knew tech. It just was like second nature. And that just kind of stuck with me. So it wasn't that I was trying to teach tech. I was always the guy that kind of had tech and was using tech. Like, I got an email. People are like, what's an email? You know what I mean? Like, I got this eMac before the iMacs. It's like, what's that? You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you could do this. Here's how, here's how you send an email. Here's how you connect the modem. And people didn't know. They just didn't know. So I was like, always ahead of that curve. And I just decided to capitalize on it. And that's how it's like, it's not that I'm not a coder. I know enough to build something that's crappy, that's going to need some help. But what I realized, I know more about tech than the average dude or woman, lady or man in our community. I know more about tech than the average Joe in our community. And I was like, let me not just sit on it. Let me share the knowledge. Let me make something of it. But I made a business. I mean, I did give a lot of it away. But it was like, nah, this is a skill, bro. This is a valuable skill set. Monetize it. Make something out of it. And that's how it got into teaching tech. What made it so important to me to get it while I'm still teaching it is because it's a game changer. It's an economic game changer. And it's the dividing line between the haves and the have-nots. Those who have not are behind the eight ball in tech. They probably don't have a data plan. They need all the free Wi-Fi. They don't understand that this device is more than just TikTok or Snapchat. And I understood that and want to help people kind of overcome that gap.
Building that technological intelligence in people, man, that's important. And I appreciate you for it. Really though, like as I'm soaking in your story, man, it's like one thing really resonates with me heavily, and it's something that I preach and hope to practice as a parent. That building the intellectual curiosity of your child, right? So you said at 12 your story started because your mom helped you incorporate a business, you became an entrepreneur. Your dad, which is hilarious, as a Chicago police officer, put you on the streets so that you knew what it was hitting for, but also sat with you and taught you the art of tinkering, right? And I hope folks listening to this understand the importance of teaching somebody to tinker. That's iterating, right? Like that's chipping away at something and continuing to reformat it and reconfigure it until it works, right? Like the best minds tinker. And when I heard you say it, I was like, damn, like, yo, his parents, I don't know if your parents, this was their plan or if this is just how they operate and they saw in you a child that like they needed to instill these things in because they knew you become the dope person that you are. But like that intentionality is crazy, man. And I appreciate your parents so much for it, bro.
Me too today. I don't know if my parents
right.
Because as a teenager, I didn't see the value. I was tweaking as a teenager. But I don't think they like knew that this was that. I don't think they were being like intentional. Oh, we're trying to develop this child to be this person. My parents is the first generation out of civil rights. They were the first generation that, were able to benefit off of abolishing redlining, right? They were the first blacks on my block, at the beginning of white flight in Chicago. I don't think they were really trying to do it. I think they were happy. They were kicking it. They were celebrating, and they were just trying to affording this new life that they were not, that was new to them. And so we had advantages, get a bike, let them go bike riding. Oh, you can build model airplanes. There's a toy shop in the neighborhood. Go get some stuff, do things with your kid. I mean, I think that my dad was just like doing that, just like, oh, you're supposed to do stuff with your kid, build stuff, right? I just think it was that. And it was a lot of people in my generation who had that. Now, and I don't know if this is, but I'm also of that first generation, mid to late 80s, where divorce really started to hit in. And I was unable to escape that. My parents divorced at a very critical time in my life. I was a sophomore in high school. And that was at the time when I really started trying to not be great. But, I do have to give a lot of credit to my parents for having the foresight. Both my parents are very educated. They both have master's degrees. And they're smart. My dad was super smart. My dad, I didn't understand. I'd never picked up his math skills. I think I'm starting to now. But he had some undeniable. He was a human calculator. I never understood how he could do that. And my mom was an avid reader and still is. And she's a philosopher. And she has great perspectives. And she speaks very well. And I get that from her. So shout out to all the parents of that generation who were just trying to do something good for their kids. And you're part of that as well.
Absolutely, man. And it's funny because like you had the right brain, left brain parents. And so they instilled sort of like those different components into you to help you become like the multifaceted person that you are. Yeah, definitely shout outs to parents of that generation. Shout outs to parents in general that are putting their kids on, taking time to really build with them and teach them things, not living vicariously through their child, but introducing them to different things that their child can now intellectually pursue, right? And that intellectual pursuit is so important. That intellectual curiosity is so important. And I want to see that continue to get built amongst our children, right? Because you see white kids at independent schools and they in Socratic circles and they doing all of this amazing stuff. And you look at our schools and our kids are sitting with their hands tied together, feet straight on the floor, watching the teacher everywhere they go in the room, and basically being force-fed information and regurgitating it back. There's no intellectual pursuit there, right? There's no intellectual curiosity being built. We're making robots. And so, less robots, more independent thinkers. And I appreciate you because you took your experiences and unpacked it in the school district, but then turned around and leveraged that entrepreneurial spirit that you have to found Genius Labs. And so, yeah, man, put us on, talk to us about Genius Labs. What is the work that you've been doing since 2014 and how have you seen that impact grow over time?
Man, I'm so lucky. I refer to myself, I'm like the G Herbo of education, right? I'm the Yeezy, I'm the Common of education, bro. I'm the Twister of education in Chicago. So I've always been a rebel rouser. I've always been the guy who goes against the grain. Mind you, I'm in education without an education background, so my life doesn't hinge on me being in education. I'm a business guy. I come from corporate. I can bounce at any time. I'm valuable. So I always fought the system when I felt like the system was not in the best interest of kids. This is at the time when, I don't know where you were at this time, but do you remember that when school administrators were fighting kids over phones, cell phones?
Yeah, we were snatching phones, and actually one of my kids, she got suspended because the teacher snatched her phone out her hand. She pushed the teacher and took it back, and like literally shed tears with this girl because I knew she was going to get suspended, and I had to explain to her why over a phone, man. And yeah. So I'm a part of that, bro, for sure.
So I was the guy, the principal in the building was like, take these phones from kids. They should And I'm like, nah. So I took a couple of phones, but I'm like, this is whack. Like, I'm taking time away from instruction to deal with a phone, probably because my stuff is whack right now because I'm not prepared or my lesson plan is not connect. You know, it's like the reason they not engaged is because I ain't giving them nothing engaging. And so I was like, nah, I'm not going to take these phones. I took a couple of phones, but then I was like, nah, I'm not doing this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the phones. If you can have your phone, the only way you can have your phone in my class is if you're looking something up. Right? So I have to give a level of trust. I trust you're going to honor my rules. I had like, in all of my years of teaching, I think I had 2 instances where I needed to call security or get a kid suspended. Maybe 2, maybe 3. I think it's 3 instances in my whole time. So I got their trust. Look, if you want to have your phone out, you gotta be doing some research. The only way you can have your phone out is if you're looking up what I'm saying to validate or invalidate what I'm giving you. So that goes back to that piece about giving them useful information. And it started to work. And then this is at the time of Twitter coming about. Facebook is like, okay, hey y'all, somebody's making money off of these phones. And how are we going to make money off of these phones? How are we going to be more than just consumers, black people? And that became my message. And that's where the Genius Lab came in. Before it was Genius Lab, I had a company called Project Tech Teens. And I wanted to just expose. It's always about exposing kids to what they could do with tech. It turned into Genius Lab because of a number of reasons, but one of them was, believe it or not, man, I hate to admit that this is a truth, but I witnessed school counselors giving kids terrible information, like, you don't need to, just do a trade. Like, did you really just say that to? Because he sucks at math and science, you're going to relegate him to just a trade? Like, I had the foresight, I call it sagaciousness, at the time to see, like, look, because remember, Ma, I was that kid, man. It wasn't, my mediocrity as a high school student had nothing to do with a lack of intelligence. It had nothing to do with the lack of intelligence. It had everything to do with a connection. So I ain't really trying because you ain't really talking to me. I'm just trying to not get in trouble. I'm trying to chase some girls and kick it. Once you give me something of value that's meaningful that I can use today, don't give me nothing that I can use in 15 years. Give me something I can use today to help my life today. You give me that, you got all my attention, right? And that's what I began to build for my students. Here. Today's lesson, you can implement today. This is going to make your life better today. So that's what it was for me. The Genius Lab became because I'm witnessing these counselors like not give hope. And I visited other more affluent school districts and I saw what they were doing. It's like the wording on the wall is like, you're brilliant. You're a genius. You're magnificent. The world is yours. Nothing is impossible. And I go to my school and it's like artwork and empty space. It's like so I was like, these are geniuses. These are black gods, black goddesses, kings and queens from the motherland. We geniuses. We built all of this. Y'all geniuses. This is where we're going to tap into your inner genius. When you come into my space, this is the lab. This is where we're going to do the science on opening up your inner genius. Welcome to the Genius Lab. And that's what it became.
Man, I love every piece of that. And so you said sagaciousness, and I'm gonna hit you with the same line my dad hits me with. It's like, you went to college, you using them big college words. I had to look, I was like, sagacious. Oh, this man that threw me a whole new one. I'm gonna add that one to the lexicon for sure, man. But no, I wholeheartedly agree with that dichotomy between high functioning schools and low functioning schools, how they look, what's on the walls, but most importantly, the conversations that are being had with the students, right? The encouragement that these more affluent students receive versus the discouragement that our students receive, right? It's bad enough
Mm-hmm.
that most of our inner city youth are coming from really tough places in high poverty, high crime rate areas, being overly policed. Parents probably have been introduced at some point to the prison industrial complex. Then we talk terrible to them in the actual schools themselves too, right? And so where is that safe
Mm-hmm.
haven? Where can they build intellectual pursuit? Where can they feel like geniuses? Where do they have that safe space to be the kings and queens that they are, to manifest what their antecedents had already done? Because like you said, we built this, man, right? And so why is it that we then feel stupid all the time? And so, I love the fact that you rebranded to the Genius Lab because you acknowledged and understood the importance of terminology and rhetoric, positive terminology and rhetoric, right? When people begin to realize and see themselves as geniuses, they operate like that, right? You know, when you see yourself as a fool or a dummy, you operate like that. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's so important, man. And I love the fact that you speaking that truth to power and using words as the tools and weapons that they're intended to be used as, because words have so much power and so much meaning. Hey, so I'm really excited to announce the first ever advertiser for the Third Lab podcast. And of course, it's the homie Teddy Gandy and his team from Blacks Apparel. Blacks is a clothing company that focuses on Black reality, both past and present. They share daily Blacks or Black facts, quotes, and content regarding Black reality through their social media. So stop by the store at blacks.com. That's BLACTS.com to check out the Blacks basic tees and all of their inventory. Blacks also uses its platform to collaborate with local artists, so keep an eye out for their limited edition tees and apparel. Make sure to use the promo code THIRDLAP for 10% off your first purchase. I mean, really, what you waiting for? Get the blacks.com, Third Lap, for 10% off your first purchase. Support the homie Teddy, support the podcast. Let's go. And so, you know, you're doing amazing work. You're tapping into that genius component of the students. You've been at this for several years now. Where do you ultimately see yourself and Genius Lab evolving to in the future?
Yeah, international for sure. We got to get outside of Chicago. First of all, we got to go across the country. I see us as like the Sylvan Learning for tech education, tech and business education. We're the Kumon of tech and business education for young people. And then we're international and we're global, same thing, global and international, because of the use of this virtual space. And we want to continue to provide that. So we're always looking for more program facilitators who kind of resonate with our mission, who care about kids. You don't have to necessarily have a background in education. You just have to, be a good person that can pass a background check and check with and get with our mission. And that's the future. Like we're evangelists at some point, global evangelists for preparing young people for careers in tech and business and entrepreneurship.
Yeah, and also simultaneously, partially at least addressing the lack of children, black and brown children, prepared to go into the STEM field, right? Because they're projecting
Absolutely.
all of these openings and hundreds of thousands of jobs in the future. And it's like, okay, how are we preparing our kids to fill those voids, right? Because if it's not them, internationally, they'll be backfilled, right? And so, what are the opportunities for us to do that work? 100% agree that like it's something that needs to go international because there are so many people that struggle beyond, like you said, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram. Like that's their usage of social media is all they know about technology. Or I play video games, right? But like there's so many different components. Learning how to solder was life changing for me because like I then learned that I could build anything I want as long as I could read instructions and like I'm not scared to burn the heck out of myself with this damn soldering iron.
Right.
You
Right.
anything is possible. And that happened for me in college. So I can only imagine for a teenager having that understanding, having that epiphany or that aha moment of, oh crap, like I can do anything, yo, like anything is possible. But I also know educators are hesitant to change, right? And even though we need change, and change is apparent in our society, we're still doing the same things that have done us a disservice for the most part across the board. And so when I hear you talking about tech education, when I hear you talking about business education, even though there's a clear financial literacy, like even though there's a clear need for all of these components in schools, we still don't see them happening often. And so just wanted to tap in with you really quickly. Have you found that to be difficult for just people to comprehend and understand the importance of having these classes or having these opportunities for their students because it's so non-traditional?
Yes, yes, yes. I had a conversation last night, very lengthy conversation last night and earlier today about this. So, we're dealing with decision makers in the education space. Everybody across the country, Genius Lab is dope. Genius Lab is dope, hands down. We got great programming and we have great engagement with our young people. But the adults are in the way. And here's been the response all year. And this has been my this has been my challenge. That's the best word that I can come up with. The response from adults has been, "Oh, we're trying to figure out this space. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to figure it out." But you have kids showing up every day. So the challenge for me is like, keep figuring it out, but bring us in. Like, we can engage the kids. Here's what we found. And we're putting together some white paper studies right now. This generation, if you are, let me make sure I get this right, 17 or younger. Really, it's this generation, 17 and younger, is broken into two generations. I don't know how Pew research is going to define them, but it's two different generations. 12 to 17 year olds, 12 to 17, and then 11 and younger. They don't give a shit about school. They don't care about this school stuff, bro. But it's still two different groups. 12 to 17, 11 and younger. 11 and younger probably gonna have a whole nother experience with school. The 12 to 17 will continue through high school. College is questionable. College is very, very questionable. They'll finish through high school. They'll finish high school. If you're 12 now, you're in 6th grade right now, you'll finish high school. If you're in 5th grade or younger, you may question high school. You definitely gonna question college. All they care about is, how am I going to adult? So what does that mean? How do I earn some income and live my life? That's all we care about. And look, you and I went to college for the exact same reason. How am I going to adult? How am I going to earn money and enjoy life? So now you just hit 5th grade. You're 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th grade trying to answer that same. Look, all I care about is earning money and enjoying life. That is business and tech. That is business and tech there. And so even if you want to be an attorney, you want to be a dentist, you want to be a doctor, right? Then there's the vocational education space, right? Plumbers, electricians, mason, carpentry, masonry, cement, all of that, right? So there are people who are definitely going to always fill those jobs. But outside of that, it's like, what am I going to do? So we adults tripping off of like, oh, you want to be a YouTube creator, you want to be a content creator. That's it. Like that's a viable career. Watch. That's a viable career to be an influencer, micro influencing. So that's the future, bro. I think public education, and it's a behemoth of a institution to try to change. But when you talk about educators are reluctant to change, and educators got to let go and release some of the control. Educators are extremely controlling, and that stifles the progress. You're so controlling because, I'm about to say it on your show.
Uh-oh.
Educators are so controlling because you're so concerned about your job. You're so concerned about your job, where the people that you're trying to teach ain't thinking about no job. And therein lies the disconnect.
Yeah, so first you'll get no argument from me around the adult culture. I'm fortunate at Kit because I can say that like people aren't really operating from the standpoint of I'm gonna make decisions based off of whether or not I'm gonna lose my job, as much as looking at it like what's gonna best influence our students and community. But I have absolutely been in places and in conversations with people where the decision making process was based off of will I be asked back next year? And especially in the charter world where it's year to year. So you have your at will employee, right? Like we don't have unions, we don't have that backing. And so you have to be super meticulous. I also think that the control component comes from lesson planning, right? And so people that were trained to be educators, literally minute by minute, they're controlling the lesson and they're controlling the learning that's happening. And I think that folks really struggle to let that go and continue to micromanage and continue to block and be in the way because they can't comprehend it, which means that it's not legitimate, right? And like we as people have to start thinking outside of ourselves. We got to tap creative people in. We got to open these conversations and the parameters of what urban education looks like and redefine it for ourselves, because when you really think about urban ed, it was white men that defined urban education, right? From the charter world standpoint, especially the most of the founders in the original stages of charter were white men. And so, as we're evolving and more people of color are taking on leadership roles, we have to open the doors for folks like yourself, because what you're talking about is the future. And you hit on that demographic of 12 to 17, 11 and under. So I read this article about how the NCAA, so USC created this like live lab for their student athletes, but specifically their football players to leverage to be able to better brand themselves, because they know how important branding is. And it was used as like a recruitment measure, but ultimately it's going to be a game changer for that school because kids will be attracted to that specifically. Yo, your program is dope. The field looks amazing. I could play in front of 60,000 people. But the fact that I can actually build a brand as a freshman in college and start getting paid for it, man, that's better than anything Ohio State or Alabama was talking about. They just want me to play football. You actually see me as more than, right? And like you hit the nail on the head, because as a recruiter, I'm talking to people 23, 25, 26. Work-life balance has become more of a conversation in the past 2 to 3 years with this younger student or young teacher demographic than ever amongst people my age. I'm 36, and folks older than us, we was just hoping to get a check. Like if I had to work 80 hours for the check, I'm gonna run 80 hours up to get this bread. You know what I mean? Work-life balance, right. Like I gotta get this money. Like, but like you said, yo, what are you gonna do that's gonna make you happy? And these kids, like 11-year-olds, 10-year-olds, can really inform you about what they want to do and are already playing them, like you said, even as a micro influencer, you can start running up checks. And so we got to respect that hustle. We have to evolve with these kids and stop trying to force feed them the shit that didn't even work for us, right? Like I saw this tweet, I'm gonna leave it here, but this tweet resonated with me. So this woman was like, if I would have known in kindergarten what I know now, I would have started saving for my future then. And that shit blindsided me, because I'm like, yo, that's crazy. That's crazy, right? Like we did her, but so many people a disservice around financial literacy and understanding, but also that intellectual pursuit, which we've been talking about as well.
Yeah, let me add into that, man. I think one of the things that's absolutely phenomenal. My mind is blown by that, because I go back to even that experience of fighting against my mom setting me up with my first business when I was 12, but look at me today, right? So we as educators, we can't be worried about an assessment. Just plant the seed. Don't be trying to assess everything. You also said something, for all my writing utensils, none of my writing utensils are around me, but seeing these young people as more than. I may have to talk to you because I may be using that, brother. That's a whole talk in itself. Listen, one of the areas where we educational leaders drop the ball every single time? We make plans for young people without including them in the conversation. And that never makes sense to me. Why are all of us sitting around here talking about what we're going to do for kids, and there are no kids in on the conversation? But we're so controlling. We're so controlling, bro, that we tell our own kids to get out of here. I'm too passionate, bro. Let me tell you this moment of truth. This on my pod. I got a podcast. This is a shameless plug, the Money Sex Gen X podcast. But on the podcast, I have a segment called Stu's Moment of Clarity. Right? It's a moment when I expose something extremely vulnerable, right? That most people probably wouldn't share. Here I am, 2021, an international educator of young people, right? And I have a 17-year-old daughter who has decided to drop out of high school. You could just marinate on that alone first, right? That's enough to sit on like, damn, yo. Some people might say your backyard ain't even in order, right? How you teaching all these kids, but your backyard ain't in order? That was my first fear or concern. I'm over it now. Nope. Because I've been giving my daughter the game since the beginning. I've been giving my daughter the game. The fear that I had to get away from was the embarrassment of what I just said. Oh my God, people are going to judge me because I'm teaching kids education. But what my daughter has said to me, one, through her words, and two, through her actions, these teachers moving too slow. I noticed. I noticed. They move, they too slow. I'm good that you gave me the game. I'm good. And her mom and I are not together anymore. So that lays another layer of complexity on top of it, right? And I'm said to mom, she good. Let it, okay. You know, I had said, hey, baby girl, maybe you want to think about taking the GED. You know, just take the GED because people are going to judge you for not having. They're going to say you dropped out of high. Like, you gotta have something to get. Right. But, okay, be done with school. Like, I'm good with it. Like, I don't know how vulgar I could get on it, but forget school. No, fuck school. You know what I mean? Like, you good. You're good. Life is going to teach you. You're going to pay for some education out here. I don't care what kind of degrees you got. You're going to pay some additional education that school ain't going to prepare you for anyway. But you, baby, you got to answer these questions. How you going to take care of yourself? And how you going to live the life that you want to live without hurting other people, without jeopardizing your freedom, without getting in trouble, being a good person, all of those things. That's my only question for you. But if you want to be done with school, I'm with you. Unenroll. Go take the GED. Be done. Just get that. That's it. That's my moment of clarity, man.
Nah, but I appreciate that because you spoke about something that I harp on constantly, which is book learning or theory versus experiential learning, right? Life. We could sit and read all day until you apply those practices and find out none of that shit works. And then you got to do something else. You know, you're really just talking. And unfortunately, you hit the nail on the head that a lot of the conversations we have, it's funny because I was thinking as you said it, like Black people, we're upset because we're not at the table when white people or the powers that be make decisions that influence us, especially around like policy, education policy specifically. But then we do the exact same thing to kids, right? Like we don't value their opinions. I love talking to 5-year-olds, like my little nephew who was 3. I love chopping in with him because he be putting me on game. He be telling me about myself and he got questions and he needs rationale and he wants to understand things. And I'm like, okay, this is it. Like, you know, this is exciting to me. I can't wait to have my own child and spend it. It's a get annoying, I'm sure, at some point. But, you know, all honesty, I'm sure. But, you know, being able to build with them and tinker and teach them how to iterate on stuff, give them the game. That is your responsibility as a parent, is to give them the game, help them understand, like you said, how you're going to feed yourself, how you're going to house yourself. Make sure you check off these bare necessities so that you have the stability you need to be successful, but get out the way, right? You know, we have to get out the way. We have to learn the value of getting out the way, right? Because again, so many times, like we're the blocks to our own progress and success. And so Scott, you know, I really appreciate you walking us through your journey, right? And even at the Scott's transparent moment, man, where we got a chance to learn a little bit more about you and no judgment. You know, your daughter's making her own decisions, and that's a beautiful thing. 100, of course she is, man. She's gonna wreck it out there, and I'm happy for her.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
Yeah. And so, Scott, you know, I would love to hear from you though. What's your motivation, man? What keeps you pushing? Why are you so intent? Like you had a moment where you said, I'm from the business world. I can leave and be good, right? And so with that understanding that you created an entire career for yourself in a different realm that you could always go back to, but you've stayed here. So I would love to hear from you. What motivates you to stay where you are and become an international in your influence?
Bro, I wish I had better control of my emotions. Because this is very, very emotional for me. I think this is very, very passionate. I'm very passionate about this. My motivation, it may sound corny, bro, but it really is just try to make my people better, man. Man, I'm just so thankful that I'm one of the guys. I'm one of the guys that's good everywhere, man. Because I am trying to leave the spaces better than I entered them. I only want to bring the peace. Look, Scott Stewart got issues. I'm challenged in my own stuff. I got my own flaws. You know, shouts out to my lady because she lives with me and she has to deal with all of that. But aside from all of that, what you see, the piece of me that you get, that the world gets, is the desire and ability, capacity to make things better for us. I just want to make it a little bit easier and I want you to have a little bit more fun. That's my motivation. Bro, I'm not doing my work. I promise you. I would be, if in an unrecorded conversation, I'll tell you what I would be doing if I had it my way. It ain't this. This is God's work. Cause I'd be doing some Lamar Odom type shit probably if it was on me, bro. I am trying to be obedient. I am trying to be obedient to God, man. Straight up. That's my motivation, to be a better man and to help my son be a better man. So my namesake, my reputation is one of doing good.
Yo, I respect it, man. It's funny you said that because I told my mom something similar yesterday. I was like, yo, I gotta stay dedicated to God because otherwise I'll be out here wilding, yo. She started laughing because she know where I came from to where I'm at. So she was like, yeah,
Exactly.
stay with God, Malcolm. Stay with God, Mal. Like, don't venture too far away. Stay where you at.
Absolutely, man.
But no, man, and there's no reason to check emotions because I'm the same way, bro. I'm mad passionate about this. I cry too often behind this, right? I gotta stay off of social media because I can't keep seeing black people get murdered, bro. Like I can't take it no more. And then what really pulls at my heartstrings for real is the murders we don't see, right? It's the young men and women that die every single day in your city and my city. Philadelphia is on trajectory to break records for murders this year through a pandemic, right? And you can apply that to Chicago, to New York, to Baltimore, to Philly, to every place, Jacksonville, all over Cali, all over Texas, Midwest, West Coast, no matter where you go, like we're at a breaking point, right? The system is opposed to us, but then we're also entrenched and opposed to each other. And it is not sustainable. And so I'm right there with you, man. I hope to continue to be a change agent. The reason why, and I feel so blessed to be a part of the making of this podcast is because God gave me this as a vision, as a demand. And it took me a while to accept it because I realized that at some point I didn't have a choice, that this had to happen. And so, I'm aligned with you in that regard because, when you're called to do something, you have to answer, right? It get that voice, that the calling gets so loud, you can't block it out. You got to respond to it. And so, I appreciate the work that you've done and that you continue to do and you will do in the future. I'm excited to figure out how you and I can connect and work more purposefully and intentionally together. I'm sure that there are numerous ways and I can't wait to explore that because that's how this happens, right? It's like when you connect with a kindred spirit, with a like-minded soul, you got to figure out, okay, how can we build, right? Like the tag of the show is each one teach one, we all learn together. It ain't Scott learn, Malcolm learn, and we do it by ourselves because that plan doesn't work. And so, I appreciate you. I appreciate your mission, your motivation, and your passion. And I'm right there with you, my brother. You doing it for your
Thank
city
you,
the same way
Maul,
I'm
man.
doing it for my dude.
Hey, man, listen, you have Sir, I'm sure you've heard this before. First of all, shout out to the 6'1" and up club. I stand 6'6".
Yes, sir. 6'4" in the building. Let's go.
Come on, shout out my man Eric, who's the host of the podcast. He's standing 6'5".
Let's
so
go.
shout out to the 6'1" and up club.
Yes, sir.
First
Yes,
of
sir.
all, but there's something, you got a certain swag about you.
I appreciate
that
you.
Permeates through even the digital space, the virtual space, right? You a dope dude, bro, and
Appreciate you.
I appreciate you. You will be one of the guys I would call my nephew. You one of my nephews, bro.
Yes, sir.
You right in that mix. You know, when you graduated high school, and you missed the point when I would have been your teacher at the high school level.
Yeah, just
a little
barely.
bit ahead of that, just barely. Though,
just barely.
You right there, man. So I'm proud to be in your circle, and I'm honored to be a part of your circle of influence, man. So thank you for bringing me in, man. I appreciate that, brother.
Yeah, man. Welcome to the Third Lap family, man. I've been telling folks this ain't a podcast, it's a way of life, man. You know, the Third Lap is all about pushing and pushing and pushing until you make it. And so it's resilience. And so, you know, welcome to the family. I appreciate you. You know, we definitely gonna keep connecting. I can't wait to touch down in Chicago. We're gonna kick it on the south side.
I can't
man.
wait to get
You
to
know
Philly,
what I mean?
man.
Oh, yeah.
I love
Come
Philly,
holla.
man. I love shout out to my man Joe Wells, who put me on the Philly, man.
Nice.
Shout out to my man Philadelphia Freeway.
Oh, yeah.
I appreciate you,
State
man.
property, all of them boys.
Gilly the Kid, Wallow.
Yes, sir.
I appreciate y'all guys. I
$1
love
worth,
Philly, man. I can't wait to get back. I was just in Philly before the pandemic. I stopped and got me a steak and everything.
Yeah.
I was just in Philly. I love Philly, man. Love you guys, man.
Yeah, and when
Y'all
you
straight
do,
with me.
yeah, you were saying about Chicago being a gangsta ass city, Philly is a gangsta ass city, bro. It is a place that is like Rocky and all of the anything tough you could think of. Philly is right there with it, man.
Y'all sure are. Y'all, I witnessed some of it. We'll talk about that offline.
Right. But nah, real facts though. I want to shout out Gilly the Kid and Wallow, $1 million worth of game. That was a huge motivational factor for me to go ahead and just do this shit. Because I'll listen to them constantly. I hope to have Gilly or Wallow, both of them, on the podcast at some point. Aspirational goal, I know, but I'm gonna keep working till it happens. Because especially with Wallow, his story about redemption is incredible. It's a fact. You can turn it around, right? When you fix your mind and your approach to life, anything is possible. It took him going to jail for 10 years to figure it out. You know, it took Gilly losing his deal with Cash Money and all of these different things that he had to go through for them to be able to codify $1 million worth of game. But the purpose and the intentionality of it is incredible, and it's important. We're codifying our experiences and sharing them with others so that they know it's possible. And so that's all this is. But yeah, welcome to the Third Lap family, man. I appreciate you, bro.
Thank you, bro.
You're listening to the Third Lap Podcast with Mal Davis.
You know, so as we get to the tail end here, we're almost done. We almost done our third lap. And so motivational thoughts for the people. So really it's like 3 minutes for you to stamp this episode. What do you want people to walk away with, understanding about you and your message and your vision, just in general?
3 minutes is that's a round, man. I guess that's in Philly's nature, man. That's a boxing round, man. 3 minutes.
That's funny. I didn't even think about that, but
Yeah,
you're right.
that's a round, man. And if anybody's ever done any boxing, one round, you got to be right.
Yes,
I know
sir.
Philly recognizes that, man. Hey, listen, I believe the motivation is this. All success starts in the mind first. What you think about, you bring about. The most important voice that you'll hear in any day, all day, is your own. So what you tell yourself about yourself is true. You have to mind what you are telling yourself about yourself. So every time you look around your living space and be like, I hate where I live, or this is a raggedy place, or I don't have no clothes to wear, I ain't got no money, I can't do you have to be mindful of the words that you are reinforcing on your psyche. Please, black people, everybody in earshot, brown people, I don't care who you are. Race and culture doesn't even matter. Please be mindful of how you are affirming yourself. What you tell yourself about yourself is true. The loudest, most important voice that you'll ever hear throughout the day. It ain't Wallow. It ain't Gilly. It ain't 50. It ain't Will Smith. It ain't Joe Biden. It ain't Kamala. It ain't none of these people. It's you talking to you. So please affirm yourself in the positive and speak life and opportunity into yourself.
Bruh. That's a whole word. That's a whole podcast episode right there, is that talking well to yourself. And, I had to learn to reformulate how I talk to myself, because I talked to myself terribly for a very long time. And I realized that I was doing myself a disservice. But it is not easy to reformulate and reconfigure that voice, especially when you spent so long thinking of yourself in a negative way. To finally make that transition to seeing yourself differently is so important. And so I definitely +1, +1,000 that, man. People do that work. But also, to touch back to being a parent, how you talk to your child is many times how they talk to themselves, right? And so if you're telling them shut up and you stupid and all of these different negative things, I'm not judging you. I'm not a parent, can't speak on it. But what I can say is, as an educator, we see that manifest itself every single day working with your children, and they become broken adults because of it, right? And so as we do the work for ourselves, we have to do the work for ourselves, because it's imperative that we pour positivity and prosperity into our kids, to put them on game, man. Much like you did with your daughter, and I'm sure you'll do with your twins for sure. And so, we are here at the end of the podcast. We made it. A couple last things here. And so, what are you reading? The Third Lap podcast. We have a book club, book list. It's not a club, it's a list. So, be intentional with the words. It's a list of books that folks can dig into at any time. But I've actually expanded it over the past several episodes to include anything really that you find joy in or joy in doing. So if you have some books or some suggestions, definitely feel free to shout them out right now.
Yeah, man. I actually was doing a book club. Mark Zuckerberg got me going and reading. He does, I think, a book a week. I was at a book a month. I just started Get Good with Money by Tiffany the Budgetnista. I just finished Way of the Wolf by Jordan Belfort. I'm listening to, because I do everything on Audible. Doing Life with Your Adult Children by Dr. Jim Burns. I just finished that book. I also really, really enjoyed 50's book. 50 has a book that I really, really enjoyed, and it's called, I'm looking at my list right now, Hustle Harder, Hustle Smarter. It's an amazing book. I'm glad that I was able to take that in. I have a lot of books. The Total Money Makeover, Dave Ramsey. $1 Trillion Catch by Eric Schmidt. The Truth About Men was a very good book, Devon Franklin. And I definitely stand by The Four Agreements, Miguel Ruiz. I could go on and on. I have a ton of books that I have read.
Yeah, so all of those books sound amazing. Feel free, if you have any other suggestions, send them over to me. Whether or not I include them in the podcast, I'm always looking for books that I can dig into as well. I'm thinking I might have to start taking advantage of Audible. Shout outs to Kyle the Conductor. But my man told me he don't even read books. All he does is listen to them. And I'm still old school. Yeah. So all right, you know what? I'm gonna give it a try. The feeling of a book in my hand, nothing can replace that though.
So keep doing that. Keep with your book. But I remember reading a few years ago, I think it was Warren Buffett, and maybe it wasn't Warren Buffett, so let's assume it wasn't Warren Buffett, but a highly successful individual said that he just has his assistant give him the cliff notes of the books to save time. Just give me the big points of the book. That's it. All I need is the big points. I don't have to read the whole. I was just like, wow, man, that's a game changer. So it's not that I'm looking for the cliff notes. I listen to the books because I can listen, I can rewind, and I can. They also have the rate of speed, So I listen at approximately 1.7, between 1.7 and 2 times the speed of the book. So I can take that in. So
I don't know how you
and
do
get
it.
through the books. Yeah, I can. I hear it. I hear it. I hear it clearly. It's not. I can't go above that. Like they have it up to 3 times the speed. I can't. I don't understand that. But at max for me is 2 times the speed.
Yeah, I had somebody on Twitter that was like, "Yo, Malcolm, like, yo, you got to catch up with the times. You still listening to podcasts on regular speed? Like, you ain't on 2 times speed." So I
Yeah.
actually went to one of my own episodes. I think it was my homie King Sharif. What up, Sharif? The first episode, and I was like, "All right, I'm gonna put it on 1.5." And it was like, "Hey, everybody!" I'm like, "Nah, my ears is too old. I done engineered too many songs. I done listened to music too loud. Let me slow it down, bro." But respect, I appreciate you. I'm gonna definitely check out Audible. That's real. I mean, I can't even tell you how many tests I passed because of Spark Notes. I ain't read that damn book. I went right to Spark Notes. I got the
Exactly.
Cliff Notes, and I passed. And I still learned what the story
Exactly.
was about. So I could
Exactly.
100% dig that for sure. And so, Scott, where can folks find you on social media? Links to your website. Where can people interact with you?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram at Professor Stew, Stew, Professor Stew on Instagram. I'm at Scott Steward, Steward, as in David.com, ScottSteward.com. I'm also at GeniusLabChicago.com.
That's what's up, man. And so, lastly, anything else that you want to share as we sign out, get to the tail end of things here?
Use time, this time in history to build our own in a very, very intentional way. It's not to not participate with the good old boy network or with America's way, but I'm hopeful that we as a people realize that there is no America if it weren't for us. And we have all the power. With our 12, 13% of the population, we have all of the power to live better lives. And I look forward to experiencing that. And I'm hoping that I get a chance to witness it. So thank you for this podcast. Thank you for this
Absolutely.
space to share. I appreciate what you're doing. I can't thank you enough, Malcolm Davis in the building. I appreciate you, man. Keep doing what you're doing, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you have amassed in the next 20, 30 years yourself.
Bro, yeah, I'm working. I'm hoping to be retired at 45 from working for other people, and 100% pursuing. I mean, I came to the realization today that I I can't say that my life was successful if I haven't played a significant hand in reforming the police in America. It can't exist the way that it does. Prison can't exist the way that it does. Public education can't exist the way that it does. And so, really trying to figure out how I'll play a more integral role in those 3 buckets, because those 3 buckets tie all together in very interesting and sad ways. It's a never ending cycle. When we get one seeming victory, we get dealt so many losses in return. And it's not sustainable. But as long as we continue to have folks like yourself, like all of the other people I've been blessed with to connect on this podcast, that continue to do this work and continue to put themselves out there to be advocates of change, it's possible. I believe in it. My mom, she said that she doesn't know if she'll see it in her lifetime, but she prays for it for her grandchildren. And I do too. I really hope that I can be a part of changing a world that my children don't ever have to deal with. Your 18-month-old twins don't ever have to deal with the shit that we had to deal with, bro. Because if we fail in that
Yeah.
regard, what do we do with our lives, right? What is our legacies if our children and their children still face the exact same atrocities that we did? I don't feel like that was a life well lived. So in that regard, this was a great opportunity for me to learn more about you, for us to connect in a very intentional way, but also just to start the process of what Malcolm and Stu do long term. I also ended up following you, Professor Stu, on Instagram. So we're going to turn up in these Instagram streets, man. But yeah,
No doubt.
Scott, I am so blessed and honored again to have you on today. It was really a pleasure. I can't wait for us to connect in person post COVID to really get it, chopping up in real life, whether that's Chicago or Philly or somewhere in between.
It's
We'll
gonna be
figure it
both,
out.
man. We're gonna
Right.
bring our ladies together, our
There you
kids
go.
together. This
Absolutely.
is we got the rest of our lives together. You are my fam. You are a
Yes, sir.
nephew. You my little brother. All of that, brother.
Absolutely, man. And so again, as always, listeners, I appreciate you all. I sing your praises constantly. Without you all listening and giving me positive feedback, this podcast probably would have ended a long time ago. And so I love you all. I appreciate you. Thank you as always for tuning in. Each one, teach one. We all learn together. This is Mal Davis signing out. Thank you for tuning into another episode of the Third Lap Podcast. This is your host, Mal Davis. Please visit thethirdlappodcast.com for more information about the podcast, about our guests, and also to see our reading list. You can find us at The Third Lap Podcast on LinkedIn and Facebook, at Third Lap on Twitter, and at third_lap_podcast on Instagram. If you know anyone that would be great to be featured on this show, please reach out to our host, Mal Davis. He's always looking for interesting people to learn more about them and to talk about their pathway. Thank you so much again. Have a good one.